Tonight, we have part 2 of our interface discussion on intelligent design. What is intelligent design? And why is it so controversial? And should we allow the school systems to teach it as science along with Darwin's theory of evolution? Here's an overview by Dr. Ahmadinejad Ahmed.
I'm not a historian, so I can't give you a conclusive answer as to whether Darwin was an atheist or not. I can tell you what the varying points of views are. As far as we know, through most of his life, he was a Christian, although not a Christian in the fundamentalist sense as we've come to know it today. But he seemed to have believed in the existence of God, and that he made frequent references to God in his own works. Of course, one might argue he was only using God as a figure of speech, which is certainly possible. On the other point of view are those who said that if he wasn't an atheist the rest of his life, he certainly must have become one by the end of it, due to the incredible criticism and opposition that he got from the religious establishment. Again, this may be true, but I don't know how one comes to a conclusion about that. My own feeling, based on his own writings, is that he did believe in God, but believed that a process of evolution by natural selection was how God chose to create the diversity of life on Earth. Darwin's theories have had to be modified over the years. What we now call the theory of evolution by natural selection is not really exactly what Darwin hypothesized. And there are some people who don't even believe that it's a matter of small steps accumulating over time, but rather that it was huge leaps coming in surges from time to time. And they believe these things for scientific reasons. But these disputes are not the ones that are behind the headline-grabbing events that we see today, like the Dover School Board decision. Rather, those are because of the continuing fight between the new Earth creationists and the proponents of any kind of theory of evolution, whether it be Darwin's or Stephen Gould's or an intelligent design in which God chooses to use natural selection as the process of evolution. And the fact is that there really is excellent scientific evidence against the young Earth evolution. There is also scientific evidence against Darwin's theory of evolution as Darwin propounded it. But that's not touching the underlying philosophical dispute, because Darwin's defenders are not bothered by the scientific criticisms of Darwin. What they are bothered by is the attempt to dress what I would call a philosophical point of view, they would say a religious point of view, in the clothes of science, and to argue that we need to, as in the case of the Dover School Board, we need to mandate that our point of view, our philosophy, be taught in the science classroom. This is as wrong as the original Scopes trial issue was wrong, the law that would have forbidden the teaching of evolution. It's wrong to mandate the teaching of intelligent design as a science, for the same reason it's wrong to prohibit the teaching of evolution as a science. Science is not really the subject of legislation. In fact, this is what scares me about this judge's decision in the Dover case. It's not so much what he said about science or religion or evolution that bothers me. It's the fact that where what he should have been saying is that the school board should not be deciding these questions.
Our guest tonight, a Methodist minister, Reverend Dick Stetler, a secular humanist, Mr. Don Evans, and a Muslim from the Islamic Society, Mr. Khalil Shadid. Welcome, gentlemen, to the Scholars Chair.
Good to be with you.
Okay. Gentlemen, we'll start tonight by asking the question, does the concept of the divine will or purpose necessarily argue against Darwin's theory of evolution? Reverend Stetler.
I don't think so. I think that they could be easily very compatible. The method that God would use is not up for debate. I mean, we're not going to be able to discern how God did what God did, and it has occurred, whether it's evolution, whether it's by some other method. I just don't think that we're ever going to get our minds around it outside of the community of faith.
Interesting. Mr. Shadid, your comments.
Well, from an Islamic point of view, as you experience what is called material world, or as you do science, you are observing the will of God, and the education of the intellect is an expansion of faith. So there's no diversions. I mean, we don't do faith in one place and science in another place. It all happens in the same place. So Islam is one of those theologies that asks you to live a religion in full consciousness of the human mind, and not ask you to accept anything that is not reasonable.
Okay. And Mr. Evans, would you agree or disagree with these points of view?
In terms of science and the divine will, I think it's important to understand historically, many scientists have been very devoutly religious, sometimes in a quirky way like Isaac Newton, but many scientists historically and even today are very devoutly religious, and they see the divine will, as Khalil was describing in the Islamic tradition, does not create a barrier with studying what God has created. From a secular humanist point of view, there's not much we would have to say about that particularly, but one of the things observing, once again, the history of science is that concepts of God seem to have gotten smaller. Richard Dawkins famously said in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, because before Darwin, the question was, well, how did all this come about? How did life get to be where it was? And Darwin certainly didn't provide all the answers, but he opened a window that did provide an answer. And the other thing to remember when we talk about the will of God, as it's very easy for God to somehow become what might be indistinguishable from just the concept of nature. Mm-hmm. And I believe that nature created everything that is. It operates according to physical laws, which we understand to a good degree, but there are things we don't understand. Of course, Spinoza, the philosopher, thought of God and nature as interchangeable. Mm. So it's the traditional God of traditional Christian theism that created the world in 6 days, raised Jesus from the dead, gave him and others the power to perform miracles. This is the sort of God which is not the sort of God that people are talking about when you're talking about the will of God behind natural phenomena, and that's where God shades into nature and vice versa. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, if I said the universe was created by God, how does this information help to understand the universe, or does it? Mr. Shadid.
That is a very difficult question to answer in this setting. For us, from an Islamic point of view, it is a given that, and I say it from this position. The Quran says that creation is not self-subsisting. Material matter in that position. Material matter does not create itself. Lending support to a greater reality, creating what we understand to be observable reality. okay, or science. So in that position, then I have to say that. Actually, Immanuel Kant said it. He said that there are modes of thinking, and he was talking about reason. There are modes of thinking that have the potential to extend knowledge. And the three elements that he points to is the belief in God, the belief in the eternal soul, and there's one other thing I can't think at the moment. But he even puts God as the foundation of reason itself. Now, does that mean that person who doesn't believe in God is not reasonable? No, it's not. But I think the divine concept has the potential of extending knowledge. And in the ways that I've just suggested, and that is to realize that there is no self-sustaining, totally self-sustaining, self-subsisting element that we can point to and say, okay, everything, the human being or material created itself. And of course, I can be corrected. I also, since we're on the second part of this, I made a serious mistake in pronouncing a reverend's name at part one, and my good friend Dunn corrected me. Reverend William, I said Paisley, it is Paley, and he's right, and thank you very much for correcting me.
No problem.
Well, we certainly would like to hear from Reverend Stetler on this comment. The universe was created by God. Does that information help us to understand the universe, or does it?
I think the concept really is a frame of reference that provides definitions for the person who believes. And that frame of reference is very, very powerful in that it makes sense out of things that really are just quantum soup. It provides an organization of the way we think. It allows us to see goodness that can come out of what somebody else who doesn't have that orientation would think is just total chaos. And allows us to make sense out of what other people maybe can't discern. And in that respect, our consciousness evolves constantly as we search, as we pry open and try new ideas, pry open boxes that were closed to us, as our awareness expands, as our horizons grow. Mm-hmm. But the universe is a very violent place when you get out there. Stars are pulling each other apart. There's problems, and even on the Earth, with babies that are born malformed. But when you have a frame of reference that helps you understand this, your life is far more balanced from my point of view than if it's all random.
Would you agree, Mr.
Well,
Evans?
I think it's, I share a lot of the sentiments that Dick has expressed. I think, as I was saying earlier, that the God that is described as this sort of unifying force or giving meaning is certainly not something that is nature itself as usually thought of. But I don't think that it's necessary. One of the problems that I would have with God is that this is some kind of cosmic mind. And to accentuate this as you've just done, it's like, well, you have a concept of God or you have chaos and chance happenings. And this is very much a misunderstanding and very certainly not in keeping with modern science, chaos and complexity theory, where we have actually had the ability for the last 10 or 15 years to program very simple algorithms into computers and then watch them evolve with just following simple rules. And we see how complexity evolves within the nature of matter and energy itself. And it actually provides one of the confirmations, not that any is needed, there are many, of the way evolution works. We don't know the details, but we know that design and complexity can arise out of very chaotic things, and it's where it arises is actually at the edge of chaos, is where this creativity. I think there's a great deal of grandeur, as Darwin said in Origin of Species. There is grandeur in this view of life, that the Creator set the laws in motion, and He did at that time. Surely believe in God as a Creator. He set it in motion. He imparted life into one form or a few, and as the eons go rolling on, everything has evolved over that time. And Richard Dawkins, who's constantly beating up on creationists and stuff, also has written books in which he argues for this sense of awe and respect, not for a kind of cosmic mind or God, but in nature, and the same sorts of ideas that religious people see in nature themselves. We just, I guess people that are not religious, we have the same emotions, but we don't attach the same sorts of mythology and the same sorts of connections to it that religious people tend to do.
Yes. It's interesting you say that, because I remember listening to a Muslim scientist, and he was saying that that the majority of observable elements in our universe is chaotic. You start from chaos.
Yeah, there's a great deal.
Because of the complexity is so much, it is extremely complex. So the human brain might determine that this is chaotic. However, the patterns and rhythm over time can be understood and comprehended and put in order, at least order in the mind. The challenge that we have with answering this complexity is that it hasn't created itself, and yet we cannot say that if we just we don't have to say necessarily the big God thing, but certainly a truth that has transcended through time. And I think that we can at least say that from both a scientific point of view and a religious point of view. And I think it's very important to be able to marry the two as we go into a world that is requiring both to coexist.
Oh. Well, that segues right to our next question. Reverend Stetler, is it possible for religion and science to coexist?
Oh my, absolutely, absolutely. If you recall history, most scientists early on were theologically trained if they weren't ministers. And certainly Darwin came through that sequence. He was a theist in the beginning. And I think the reason he became an agnostic at the end wasn't because of his lack of faith, but it was because of the dogma the church was dumping on him and challenging him. And when the church becomes your enemy, and it often has been, it's been that way for years, you need somebody, a new visionary to come along to correct the dysfunction of the church. And I think that's the way it's been. But as in terms of science and religion, I think they complement each other. I think they supplement each other. I'm with you, Khalil, that they don't need to be operating in different spheres. I think they make sense out of each other, and they should be in bed together. They truly should.
Yes, I agree.
Would you agree with that, Mr.
Well, I think
Evans,
there's always going. I do think religion and science are compatible. I think science is, philosophers argue about aspects of science, but it's pretty much one thing that can be done in any culture using the same tools and concepts. It's very democratic, ruthlessly so. If you publish a theory, prepare to be attacked. Religion is much more malleable than science. You can have a religion which is sort of soft. Some of the New Age ideas are sort of this way. And it's like everyone's religion is as good as anyone else's as long as they're sincere about it. Well, that's not likely to be the sort of religion that's going to contrast and have difficulties with science, because it's so malleable. And to say that is not to say that it's not extremely meaningful to many people. It obviously is. So religion and science, they do in fact coexist. It's not the question whether they can. You can see that they do. But there's always going to be a tension with religious beliefs which make claims which go off into the area of science. For instance, religious claims that you're convinced that space aliens are going to come and snatch you away from the Earth, therefore to get ready you commit suicide. You're going to have things, well, you could actually go and look with telescopes and see if there is this comet, and you can do other things and have other people check your results. And if that conflicts with a religious tenet, yeah, you're going to have conflict. Yeah. And you do definitely, that's why we have the conflict over intelligent design in the schools, because it does conflict with very cherished theological and religious ideas of a certain segment of the American population. Not all, but a significant segment.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Jadid, would you care to comment from the Islamic perspective?
Well, for Muslims, we've never had this dichotomy. We've never had the separation of the two things. Knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge, regardless of how you pursue it, the human brain can benefit from. Okay, whether it's the notion, if you're pursuing it in the way of religion, or you pursue it in the way of science, knowledge is knowledge is knowledge. You know, both spheres support each other in our way of thinking. But I think even in the evolution of science and Christianity in the Western world, if we go back to the 10th century, Franciscan monk Roger Bacon, who married the two very well. He also did not separate religion and science, only from the standpoint that he understood that religion asks why the universe is created, why do we grow old, why do things grow, why does the universe does what it does, you know, and he also understood the how of things, which is the question that science answers, and I think it's very important to understand that difference because you can get a problem, as Don said, of religion trying to answer scientific questions. So I agree. Well, not only Francis Bacon, but I would probably say Galileo also married the two together, although the church did not think so. Mm-hmm. But I think, but Galileo was a very religious person. And you have a lot of religious Jews that was able to marry philosophy, reason with their religion, and I would just point to Maimonides, Moses Maimonides, for that, because he believed in the unity of human existence. You know, and he didn't separate them either. So these ideas have been around for a long time, and I think that it's very unfortunate that we're having this struggle in America, one of the most powerful countries in the world, with the science that we have available to us. We really should not be having this discussion at the level that we're having it now. You know.
Yeah. Gentlemen, should public schools teach intelligent design as science? Why or why not? Mr. Evans.
Well, I definitely think intelligent design, as I argued earlier, is really not science, and therefore it should not be taught in a science class. I don't think there's really anything to teach. It's teaching about problems, some of them quite arcane in regards to complexity theory and information theory from William Dembski, a leading intelligent design advocate. This is far above the level that you have time for in a high school class. If you have time to talk about some of the basic ideas of evolution at all, you're lucky. If it's in a public school, perhaps in a social studies class or contemporary problems on the American scene, current events, yes, definitely. The difficulty is that teachers, as well as students and their parents, are likely to be very much identified with one party or the other here, and I don't think the intelligent design people want their theory talked about and ripped to shreds in a social science class, or have it presented, for instance, the Genesis creation story presented alongside with folk tales from Africa or India or wherever. They don't want that, and frankly, it's probably not really feasible to discuss this in a high school setting or younger, because it is extremely controversial as a social issue, not as a scientific issue, but as a social issue.
Would you agree?
I would agree with that. I think there is a place for it in the classroom, but it would be in the context of saying these are very cutting-edge ideas that are conflicting, and this is this point of view, and this is this point of view. But I think you're always going to have your policemen at the board meetings who are watching the kind of curriculum, and they want to monitor the curriculum. They want to see that their point of view is accurately interpreted from the position of faith, which then takes it into the religious sector. And unless you have a theologue come in there to deal with it, as an advocate for that point of view, it's up to the teacher, you're going to find such subjective analysis that it's just going to be chaotic to have something consistent across the university level or high school level.
Would you agree, Mr. Shadid?
Well, of course, I absolutely agree that the two should not be taught. Certainly, intelligent design should not be taught as science. Because it's not science, and I quite agree with Don. I mean, we have to be very clear with what is observable in nature and what is not, and this is also goes to the original position of Muslims throughout the world. In Arabic, is la ilaha illallah, which is a clear statement that we do not know all that God is, but at the same time recognizing that God is beyond our ability to total access. And I think it's critical that we understand the difference. The moment a person says he knows God, then people should start hauling him off to a straight room somewhere. But I think, however, from an Islamic perspective, there are so many references to observation for the position of order, discipline, appreciating boundaries, understanding that with authority of law, that one can even escape the gravitational pull of the earth. I mean, this is Quran. So when you talk to a Muslim about these separations, it challenges Muslims a little bit. Because there's so many references to science, even in gestation things, the gestation of the baby in the womb, there is an indication in the Quran to direct the person to this evolution that happens in the human being.
I'm going to have to leave it right there again this evening. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution to our program. Yeah. And if you'd like to know more about the Scholars Chair, you can go to www.scholarschair.com. Thank you and good night. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're kidding me.
Read One Communication presents The Scholars Chair.
One of the best things you can give your child or grandchild doesn't come from a store. It's time spent with you exploring the gifts of nature, discovering that what's really important in life is life itself. Go to ArborDay.org and check out the National Arbor Day Foundation's Kids Explore Club. Your family will have fascinating adventures right in your neighborhood, and you'll gain a deeper appreciation for the wonders of nature and for each other. Whether you live in the city, the country, or anywhere in between, ArborDay.org has fun activities just right for you.
Oh, the Arbor Day Foundation, families across the nation, plant a tree today for all the world to share.
The new Kids Explore Club, bringing children closer to nature and closer to you.
Glucose plus oxygen equals carbon dioxide plus water.
Hey, dear, what's up?
And energy. Superior vena cava, pulmonary artery, coronary artery.
I'd like to pass them back to you now.
For chem tissue types of endoplasmic reticulum with ribosome. 3 o'clock already. And without. Copy of the skeletal anatomy syllabus. For chem cycle Wednesday. Velocity skeletal anatomy Thursday. The lobes of the cortex.
She's got the drive.
Cranial volume.
The energy.
Ventral, parietal.
The heart.
And occipital.
And the talent.
Cortical motor output. Vena cava.
Pre-med.
But she wouldn't be here
Evolutionary development.
without your help. Please support the United Negro College Fund, because a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Syllabus for Chem 2.